I'm Elisa Jordan, a postdoc at the Center for Experimental Ethnography, and I'm excited to be here with the students, some of them prior students, and filmmakers in Amit Das's ethnographic filmmaking class, who created a wonderful, slightly over 10-minute piece on William Sayre Highschool. And I'd really just like to hear them talking about that. You can find a link to the short film in the description here, and we're excited for you to join us. So first, I'd like to introduce Jean, who is a rising senior in communications and visual studies at the University of Pennsylvania. Hi, Jean.
Hello.
And I'd like to introduce Alejandra, who is a recent graduate of the International Education Development Program and the Graduate School of Education. She just got her Master's of Science in Education, so congratulations, Alejandra.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi. And Marianne, we have here as well, who is about to be finished with her Master's of Science in Education. She's also in the International Education Development Program in the Graduate School of Education at Penn. Hi, Marianne.
Hi.
Great. Like I said before, you may want to watch the film before you listen to this. I'd really like to turn to Alejandra to kind of set the scene for us on what it was like doing this community-led, in a lot of ways, or community collaborative project with William Sayre High School, with the youth program in cooking and nutrition. So if you want to take it away, Alejandra, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for letting us talk about this film. It became a little passion project for all of us beyond just like a class assignment. This was actually our second placement. So we began the semester with another placement at another high school, and we were working with a student there. She was a senior, and she was very passionate, but it turns out that the school didn't recognize the commitment of being our partner for this program. And I think also there was some apprehension as to just how much freedom we were giving our student to dictate the project, to kind of give us her thoughts. We were really just there to kind of edit what her point of view was. So we ended up changing because of that commitment. We ended up changing in February to Sayre, and for about 2-3 weeks, we didn't know what we were doing. We were very much lost in February, and we needed to have rough cuts done by April, I think, like the first week of April. And we also had spring break in between. So we heard about Sayre. We heard that they had a cooking club. We visited once, like the three of us, loved it, and we were recording the whole time. We're like, let's just capture everything. And it was decided that we would help them produce their cooking show and kind of teach them how to edit and use film and how to do things to be able to upload and share with their friends, while also using that footage for ourselves. So it would be kind of like a how-to. And you guys can jump in if I'm missing something. So the first meeting went really well. We were just kind of like warming up to everyone. Like Jean said, we were using our personal cameras along with the school-provided camera. And then spring break came. Marianne was still in Philadelphia, so she followed up and went to the next meeting with the youth and the cooking club and filmed everything. And then the following week was when we were prohibited from going because of Corona. That's when all the measures and restrictions started coming in. So we only had 2 days of filming, and that's all the footage we had. And then later on, Jean, because she's an international student, because she had to leave, we didn't realize that some of the film was on her camera too, and we weren't able to access it. So we had 2 days of filming. One of the days had restricted film that was available, and we had to come up with a short film for our class while also producing something for our students. So the first thing we produced was their cooking show, and then the second thing we worked on was the film. And it was a shift kind of coming. It came together very quickly in a matter of weeks, but we the whole time were dedicated to like letting the group take the lead. Like this wasn't our story. We were very much coming in being like, this is already set. They already have their club. They already have their mission. We're just here to kind of record this and edit this and modify this so we could share it. And that's kind of the guiding principle of this, was making sure that we were respecting the students, their points of view, but also the mission of the club. And I think that carried out throughout the whole film.
Yeah, so the first time we recorded, I had my personal camera with me, so we had like more angles to do a better editing job afterwards, and also to give the students an opportunity to play with different kinds of cameras and to be exposed to how film comes through different lenses. And then I left my camera before spring break in my off-campus apartment. And then when the pandemic started and I couldn't go back to Philly, my camera and all of my things were in Philly, so I couldn't go back and pick them up. And even though Marianne and Olive were in Philly, they couldn't access my off-campus apartment because it was dangerous at the time because people didn't know who had the virus, who didn't. So yeah, a big chunk of the footage, especially the close-up shots of the food of the kids cooking, were in my camera, but that made us be more creative in the editing process.
May I also say something? Also, so we had the main school camera that Mary Ann was kind of anchoring, and then Jean and I had our cameras, but there came a point during our meeting where we just handed them to the students. So the students that weren't cooking or that weren't necessarily, they were just kind of like supporting. We're like, do you want to do this? And we would just hand the camera. So that was kind of cool too. Some of the shots are done by the students.
In fact, I was going to segue into that. There was a moment in which just backing up a second, there was a moment in which I spoke to Amit and I said, Amit, we have only about 50% of the footage that we need for this film. And he cut me off in mid-sentence and said, nope, you have 100%. You already have what you need. Just edit it, just put it together. And then he said something along the lines of creativity happens within parameters and within restrictions. And I think that was really the spirit of all of this, is that how can we still be creative with very little, and while we're separated from each other as editors, but also separate from our students who it was supposed to be from them, by them, and about them. So how can we still make it as participatory as possible? And it was a challenge, but I think we found that happy spot, that creativity within the parameters.
Wow, that's fantastic. The line that Amit said, but also the stuff that you guys did is just working together, especially in the space of not having the footage and learning to turn that into a positive. Is a tremendous piece of work from each of you, especially having to turn something that is supposed to be fundamentally participatory, in which you feel like the participation hasn't, that it's not necessarily, the content of what you have is not fully representative of the extent of the participation that you actually did. And yet it comes across that participation was so fundamental in the final cut. So, okay, your film covers so much. It gives us a sense of these super charismatic budding chefs and content creators within an after-school programming environment that is, even without COVID, and I think it's important that your film brought this up, it's precarious, even without a pandemic, derived from an inequitable educational system, given that private schools, as is said in the film, might provide these lessons as essential portions of everyday curriculum. In a project that was subject to tremendous upheavals, you successfully dove into this after-school program, featuring these budding chefs while pointing to critical nuances of the situation. That is a lot of ethnographic work, and I'd like to hear you talk about the stuff that the audience didn't get a chance to see. So I'd like to turn to Mary Ann here. And if there is, I wonder if there's a moment or an instance or an interaction that you had with the students or doing the work that stands out to you as a learning experience about how this form of collaborative, participatory, ethnographic educational film is different than simply reading or writing about things.
There were so many moments, and I think that with the camera there, it just added another element entirely than had we just gone in with, notepads, asking them, to speak about their experiences, but giving them the chance to film it, to perform an identity and to show who they are, just added another level of, I think, creativity, even professionalism to the entire thing from day one. They were really interested when we walked in with cameras and, boom poles, all this like high-tech equipment. And then right away, there were two boys who really wanted to help out. So that was Za and Devon. They grabbed the boom pole. Devon took the boom pole, and then Za took the camera, and he was just like, just let loose with the camera. He took it from my hands, and so he was holding it. He was like turning it on the tripod. He was zooming in, zooming out. He did almost the entire filming process with me standing over his shoulder and standing with him and just looking at the footage together. And he was taking ownership over it, because when the boys, he would tell his friends, redo that part, or like, say that again, or stop, now start, while they were working. And then as soon as they were finished, they would come over and they would see their footage. And it was a performance, but it was so real at the same time. And then he would show them what they were looking at. And I got a few snaps of him showing them their footage. So it was really exciting to see how eager they were to do that.
It's the one we have on the website, if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
That's such a fantastic
Yeah, that's exactly
photograph.
it.
Definitely, I'm going to put it up here. Right, so you guys can look at it? Okay.
And that's all just natural. And they had no idea I was taking pictures of them. And Eric as well. The kind of interactions and relationships they had just came out so, I think, just so beautifully behind the scenes. And we try to capture that in the edit. But I guess just the mood in the room was just so vibrant and vivacious and authentic. And you could tell that they had relationships that we were privy to, that we were walking in on, and just trying to learn from that. And that's really, I think, the essence of ethnographic filmmaking, is that you have to build connections with people. And we were lucky to walk into an opportunity that was in front of us, waiting to be revealed through film. They wanted us to come in and film this. And another significant moment I want to draw attention to is a boy named Josh, who was really quiet on the first day that we filmed, like almost in the shadows, a student that you might not really notice because they don't really raise their hand very much. They're not really that active as much as the others, but a quiet student. But then by the second time I was filming, he was taking a lot of agency that day. He was like doing most of the work, most of the cooking, and he was fine behind the camera. So it took him a day to get comfortable, but by the second day, he was like right there, and he wanted to speak, he wanted to explain. And so it's like he almost found his voice through this, which was really quite beautiful to watch the way that he changed over the course of a couple of sessions. And the boys were also trying to put together a rap song, which, it just shows another way in which this type of creativity maybe isn't offered in regular school day sessions. But they were writing a rap song for this film, but because of the disruption, they never got to connect again and get it together. But I still want to mention that had we had more time, they would have, even introduced it in a more participatory way with their own rap song. And there was lots of times where they were joking about COVID behind the scenes. So they were grappling with everything behind the scenes and also on camera. And there's even if you listen closely, there's a couple of moments when they're speaking that you can hear them like mentioning, like, touching this, hands washing, things like that. So they were grappling with all of this and representing it behind the scenes and on the camera. And it was just a very real and authentic process, and just so full of life.
So COVID cuts into your film in a tangible way that you guys chose to preserve rather than background. It's jarring, it's emotional, and the disruption is clear. And I just want to emphasize that everyone watching this really needs to go back and look at the really fun edits that were made with the use of a television and the metaphor, which actually became like a lived experience for all of us of just sitting in front of our TVs watching something. Between a cooking show and the pandemic news, and then the way that news is just kind of fragmentary at first, but then it suddenly overtakes it, and you see how quick that shift happened. I'd love to talk about the editing process, so I'm going to turn to Jean for that question.
Hi. Yeah, well, thank you very much for that, because the first time we shared the film with our class, like the final rough cut, we got very mixed reviews from the teachers and the classmates about how disruptive the news footage really was and how uncomfortable they were watching that. And then as a team, it was, well, personally for me, it was very hard to hear, because we felt very passionate about the project, and we felt very passionate about how emotional the film was. So after that feedback, we had a little meeting ourselves, and we decided not to take that away, to keep it as it was, and to make some small edits where we thought they needed to be made after the feedback. But ultimately, the three of us decided that the disruption needed to be an essential part of the film, because it was not only what we were experiencing, but it was what the kids were experiencing and what audiences that would watch the film after could relate to. So we made it an integral part of the film. And I'm so happy to hear from you that it did make you feel exactly what we wanted to communicate. Because we haven't heard much feedback from other people outside of the class. And it's rewarding to hear your experience.
I definitely think it was. I think it was a great choice. I tend to like, especially given that we're at the Center for Experimental Ethnography, I think that high risks have high rewards, and there's a certain level of experimentation when you're trying to produce affect in an audience, as opposed to simply tell them a story that has a neat wrap up and ending. So I think in terms of an experimentation and producing that disruptive, jarring experience, and not just producing it for people who never had it, but reproducing it for people who felt it, and how that disruption, though we've all felt it in deeply personal ways, also has ricocheted through our society. And that sense that even I remember I was telling this story to a friend last week, that I actually had planned to return to my research in Haiti a day after Penn released the travel ban. And that travel ban was the first thing that I got. It wasn't, everything hadn't shut down yet. It was just this note out of the blue is what it felt like from this situation that granted had been developing about COVID. But the first institutional response was just that there can be no university related travel. And then it felt like, wow, what a disappointment. I feel like I could still go. All of those feelings that it really wasn't going to be that bad, and how quickly within a matter of like 48 hours, that entire attitude changed. So I feel like that process going from, what is this crazy news coming out of like this flickering channel? That process of experiencing it as crazy news, as something totally off the world, and then like zoning back to what we were doing before, and finally having that cut out at the end is really representative, at least of my experience of what.
When the interruption happened with COVID, I was very quick to be like, guys, interruptions happen all the time. Like, I've been in youth programming where grants get cut mid-program, and suddenly it's an 8-week program instead of a 16-week one. Or where instructors aren't allowed to use the building. So now you're like scrambling to find space. So like interruptions are not abnormal for youth programming. So let's play off of that. Like, let's talk about like, this interruption is happening to everybody. So as everyone's feeling the discontent and the kind of like unnervingness, frustration of being interrupted in their daily, everyday normal, this is kind of like the quote unquote normal for youth programming. Year in and year out, you don't know what you have. So let's play off of that, because that's an unsettling feeling that suddenly everyone has, and that doesn't really happen. Usually communities, they kind of stay with their unsettling feelings, but like beyond that, like this pandemic. So that's kind of, I think that also helped in this case. We were able to use the material and the subject matter kind of pivot a little bit, but then include what was happening in the world.
Great. And not even just using that interruption, but all standing up for it as an important part of the work that you guys did, especially when confronted with people who are a little more uncomfortable with the way that edit went. That's fantastic. That's a real testament to your guys' team spirit, that you didn't splinter and fragment at criticism, but you guys were able to pull together. And
that was all Jean. Like that piece was longer. We did edit to refine it a little bit to kind of we picked the focused kind of news stories, or Jean did, where it had to do with schools, had to do with like imagery that had to do with what we were talking about. And that was all Jean. Like, Marianne will also back me up. Like, we gave her some YouTube clips where like, these are some things we're thinking about. And then she just like did it, and it was emotional. We're like, okay, awesome.
Yeah, that was entirely by Jean. Yeah, go ahead,
I think
Jean.
I disagree. It wasn't entirely me. So part of what happened is that editing videos, as you know, is tricky, and it's best if you only do it in one computer. So since we were like not together, I took on the responsibility of editing the video in my computer. But having said that, I never felt like as I was editing by myself. I feel like this was completely 100% a team effort. The editing was not done by me. It was done by the three of us. So I disagree with you guys.
The practical side of things, we had a Google Doc, and we kind of wrote on there. All three of us kind of decided like what clips to use and then organized them. I wrote some narration, and like they added their comments. Jean added a couple of stuff. So like we had this Google Doc kind of forming as editing was happening. So she would message us and be like, hey, I'm editing this thing. This feels kind of lumpy. I'm going to add this other thing. And then we'd go to Google Doc and like see okay, we only have this limited amount of footage. Let's Lego build this. Like, what can we add where? And Marianne cataloged basically. She was the like encyclopedia of all the different clips. So we were like, we have a clip where like students are laughing and staring at a pot. And she's like, yes, we do. like very specific. And yeah, so I think that helped too, that all of us were very intimate with each thing that we were in charge of, but also had this flowing document that I could step back and be like, okay, does this read like what we want it to read? Oh, God.
In a lot of ways, I feel like Ale was, I want to use the word leader, but like a
Yes.
lot of the, okay, yeah, I'm going to go with leader then.
I was going to say she was a backbone of the project.
Yeah,
The
yeah, and so many
structure of it all.
ideas came. The story, the narrative was Ale. Like, you know, she said she was the one who got us to think about this as a COVID interruption. Like, we all wanted to make this a film about making a film, but we hadn't seen it quite that way before. So I think like the narrative was all Ale's, and you know, like Jean said, a backbone. She kept us on track, like just everything.
I think it helped that I wasn't a total film artist like these two are, that I could be like, all right, guys, let's rein it in. Like, we have a deadline.
Yeah. Kept us on our toes.
Yeah. That's fantastic. You guys all worked so well together. Well, it was great talking to you guys. I guess what I'd like to wrap up with is if you guys could tell me if the students have seen it, if the coordinator of the program has seen it, or people from the school, your families, just give me some of the reactions that you've experienced since showing this and just talking about the project in general.
My family's seen it. I screened it during my graduation, like, celebration. And so my family abroad, and I like made makeshift subtitles for my Spanish speaking family. But I shared it with them, and most of them are educators or they work with community youth groups. And it was a very positive response, but it also kind of inspired them to kind of be like, should we be recording what we're doing? And I'm like, yeah. And it can literally just save it on your phone. So my mother, she's a preschool teacher. So she's been voice recording her kids' responses to questions about COVID. And she's like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with this later. And I'm like, just save it. And so, yeah, it definitely has inspired some smaller projects for my family.
Wow, so you've inspired some archival projects. That's exciting.
Yeah, some storytelling.
Jean, have you shown it?
Yeah, I shared it with my family here in Mexico, and they liked it. It kind of lets them see what I'm doing in Philly and all the opportunities I've been able to have. And for me, just looking back at it, it's a bit nostalgic at the time we didn't have with the kids, but it's also rewarding to see how the success of our teamwork work together enabled us to produce a film under these extraordinary circumstances.
Marianne?
Well, I showed it to my family and to my students in Karachi because I've just been in touch with them since I left. I'm in a class right now with Joseph Brand, who's the leader for the Netter Center Connection to Sayre. And so he and I also spoke about it just over text message the other day, and he said that the film was awesome. And so, yeah, I think that, I didn't really discuss the film with the other people. I just simply shared it to them on like a WhatsApp message. But I mean, that's a good point. I should actually follow up with them and just, give this an opportunity to actually talk about how art can continue and also take on a new critical consciousness during a time in which everything is in flux. I'm taking a class right now called Flux Methodology and Pedagogy, and I'm seeing a lot of parallels to the ethnographic filmmaking side of it. Like, how do we create knowledge in a time when everything seems to be up for grabs? And how can we revisit what we thought that we knew and the knowledge systems that we rely on? A lot of it is based upon, Western conceptions of what is true and what can be known. But I think that's where the experimentation needs to come in as well, and the flux part of it. And it's a time of flux right now, but why isn't it always a time of flux? Maybe it should be.
Thanks so much. It's been great getting to hear from you guys. Stay in touch, okay?
Yeah,
let us know if you do
will.
any more work, and we'll do more student features.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Ale, Jean, good to see you again.
Yes, I miss you guys.